This year, I think if Bitcoin goes to, $250,000 to $350,000, I think MSTR is easily sitting at somewhere in the region of $1,200 to $1,600 a share. I think we have a really good chance of hitting somewhere between $300,000 to $400,000 should it be a normal cycle. I truly believe that there is an S-curve moment coming for Bitcoin. I don't think you need to be a genius to understand it's basically now or never. It's a once in a species opportunity, this is. You need a higher allocation than you have.
Do you still think that it's possible for the average person to get to that coveted one full coin?
No.
Bing bong. I am back with another edition of the State of Bitcoin podcast, where I've got the man, the myth, the legend, recurring guest, British Hodl in the house. There's a lot of talk going on right now about MSTR. We just had 21 whose literally entire strategy is just to buy Bitcoin and hold it. But British Hodl, you've been banging the drum for so long to get to one Bitcoin. Do you still think that it's possible for the average person to get to that coveted one full coin?
No.
All right, why? You got to explain on that, man. Dive into it.
It's 95 grand. I mean, of course it's not possible for the average person. It's not even possible for the average American at this point. So no, it's probably possible for 0.6% of the world right now. So
well, that's what.
Well,
yeah, let's go. Let's hear it.
You fucked up.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, why do you think?
By the way, I know you. I know you. The first time that we did this, you said this is the bar stool of Bitcoin. And I know that you're going to try and catch me out. I know you're going to try and bring up Spaghetti Boy. I know you're going to do all of these things, and you're not going to catch me out. I have 2 coffees here just prepped just for you, because I know exactly what you're like, and I know you're going to try and make me look silly, and you're going to try and catch me out, and I'd like to see you try. I'm ready.
Not trying to make you look silly here, man. I want you to get in and go in. I want to hear the explanation, because I think you've been tweeting out here lately. There that exactly like you said, right? 95% of people or 99% of people can't get to one Bitcoin, but that's why you must. And
that's why you absolutely must.
Yeah, and I like that. I like that viewpoint, to be honest with you, because I think the lot of talk that we see right now on YouTube and Twitter and all that is, all right, let's lower that bar. Let's get to 0.21. Let's get to 0.01 Bitcoin. And personally,
weakness.
Exactly. And that's why I love your viewpoint on that. And that's why I want to hear the rant, man. I want to hear you say why you think that, how people can get to that full one Bitcoin.
Yeah, look, I don't know. I don't know how the average person can get to that one full Bitcoin. The average person can't seem to, can't even seem to get a job right now. So I don't know what the average person can do. You have to be above average at this point if you're going to get to that one Bitcoin. It has to be the sole focus of your, momentary existence for the next few months if you're going to do it. Otherwise, you're not going to do it. And, the beautiful thing about it is there's absolute finality of scarcity. So it's a binary. This is not like some happy hippie horse shit where we're going to have hugs afterwards and you're going to be a part of it. The problem is that most people are completely comfortable with mediocre, right? So what they want to do is they're happy taking part, and that's okay, I guess. I was speaking on a panel yesterday at an event here in Dubai, and just the type of dumb fuck questions that you're getting from people that are apparently interested in Bitcoin is ridiculous. Right next to me, I had someone representing a public Bitcoin miner, and he's talking about how difficult and hard it is for them to scale, how hard it is to get access to capital, how hard it is to actually run a mining operation. And what's the next question he gets? Well, how do I, as a Bitcoiner that just probably figured out Bitcoin 6 months ago, get into mining? You don't get into mining. Understand your role. The guy who has got access to capital at a cheaper rate than any one of us individuals can get it at is telling you it's hard. So at this point, if you don't understand that your objective and your position in this world is to basically acquire as much Bitcoin as possible, then you're not going to do it. That's it. It just is. You can't help everyone. Not everyone can be saved. Brandon.
Hey, I hear you on that. And I think it's interesting because you talk a lot about MSTR, the MSTY, and all of that. Now, with all of these players now starting to come in, with the institutional adoption absolutely erupting, how do you see Michael Saylor and MSTR just evolving throughout this time, and all these other companies starting to come in and essentially attempting to copy him, or maybe even one up?
Absolute beast. Absolute beast. That's why I give my money to Strategy to do it for me, because there's no way I can borrow money at those rates. I can get money at central bank rates on equity positions, right? He can get money at lower than central bank rates. Like, there's just no way that I can beat that. So that's why I give him my money. And he continues to serve the shareholders in exactly the way that he promised to, which is to acquire as much Bitcoin as possible. And I love it. I love being a shareholder of Strategy. I love it. I love the fact that there's competition coming into the space. There's volatility coming into the space. Now we got Jack Mallers, who is an amazing, he's an amazing savant at being able to explain what the use cases of Bitcoin and the importance of Bitcoin. And now we have him going up against Saylor, who is a monster in his own right, and before anybody else. So this is only good, right? Imagine what CNBC is going to feel like when the first person you're speaking to is Michael Saylor and the next person you're speaking to is Jack Mallers. Like, this is, it's fantastic for Bitcoin. This is unbelievable, but you have to own enough. And most people are just happy taking part, and that's okay. There's lots of people happy taking part in life.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. Now, with the evolution of Saylor, right? It seems like he's pulling out all the stops, using every traditional financial tool to basically acquire as much Bitcoin as possible with that. So, there's always this talk that MSTR is essentially like a levered play on Bitcoin. When Bitcoin goes up, MSTR goes up 2, 4, 5, sometimes even, 6, 7x what Bitcoin is going on. Now, with Bitcoin potentially shooting off to here, I'm curious to hear your evaluation on MSTR and where you think that this could potentially be going, even with as crazy of numbers that Saylor's is throwing out here just for the Bitcoin price.
Yeah, I think I've started to explain MSTR to people now. I thought of a new analogy, right? Because it's like you got to find a new hammer every time to try and bang people over the head with it. So my new hammer and my new analogy is this. What Michael Saylor is doing is he's creating, if you like, a social network for dollars, right? So imagine Instagram, right? Instagram is for humans. MSTR is a social network for dollars. And what that means is that there's many people that use Instagram for many different reasons, right? Some people like the posting feature. Some people like the story feature. Some people like, the double tapping on the likes on photos. Some people like the DMs, right? These are all features of the underlying platform of Instagram. And what Michael Saylor is doing is creating a social network for dollars. So you can come in and just own the underlying equity. That would be like posting on Instagram. You can come in and trade call options because you think the price is going to shoot up. That would be like double tapping a photo. You can come in and short MicroStrategy. You can buy puts on MicroStrategy because, and that would be like using DMs, for example, right? So it's creating this social network for dollars, and all of these things, the ability to use the derivatives markets, the ability to own the stock, the ability to use all of the different products that are being created around it, including MSTY as an income fund. All of these things are features on top of the social network of MicroStrategy or Strategy for dollars. And so all of these are avenues for capital, just like Instagram implements all of these features for avenues for people. And that's the way I want people to think about it. So just that one avenue of a feature is worth something, right? But all of it combined and all of these access and inroads into Strategy's vortex are exponentially compounding on each other. And that's what's going on with Strategy. So yes, it's absolutely worth more than just the underlying Bitcoin, because there's all these other features that are available to the dollars rather than just exposure to Bitcoin.
Yeah. So, with that,
Do you like that analogy, by the way? Do you like
no,
that
I do.
social network analogy?
I really do. It makes a lot of sense because there is so many different elements to it, and I haven't really heard it explained that way. And there always seems to be a new ticker or something else popping up, right? There's MSTY, the STRK. There's all these different avenues of micro strategy, or now strategy B, that have popped up. And to be honest, like, as just a guy who's been interested in the financial space and I guess doing the media for a little bit, there's new things that I'm learning strictly because of Michael Saylor and what he is implementing here. Yep. And it seems very unique. And, essentially he's just like opening the playbook for all of these other companies to say, hey, here's the infinite money glitch, the flywheel, whatever you want to call it. And I think that that's going to absolutely skyrocket. In fact, even 21, Jack Mallers, who we talked about a little bit earlier, they're saying that they don't think strategy is doing enough to get enough Bitcoin at this point. So I think whatever, strategy is going to do in the future is going to absolutely accelerate, because, they're going to be pushing each other to try to acquire more and more Bitcoin. Now, with that, I want to hear like kind of your projections for not only like the Bitcoin price, but the MSTR price here going forward. Do you think that we're going to see, MSTR potentially become the next, the highest market cap company here in the next year or so, especially if we see Bitcoin at upwards of $1 million?
No, I don't think strategy is good. Well, if Bitcoin gets to $1 million, it's a whole different story. But based on the trajectory that I'm seeing, I don't think strategy becomes worth $4 trillion or $3.5 trillion in the next year. I don't think that. But do I think that happens over a 5-10 year window? Yeah, absolutely. Because ultimately it's about the growth engine powering the company. And that growth engine for strategy is Bitcoin. And the fact that Jack is out here saying they're not doing enough is great. You want this, right? You want them basically goading each other to acquire more Bitcoin. This is a good thing. Will I be owning some 21 cap? Maybe, I don't know. I'll have to see what happens. Right now is obviously they're still in the middle of the SPAC raise and everything else. So we'll see what happens. But once it turns into an actual company, and we'll see what their execution is, and also what the implied volatility is. That's what drives capital in all these other markets. It's implied volatility. So we'll see. Basically, Saylor has been using this word for the last few months, and I've been trying to say it to everybody, like, pay attention every time he uses it. And it's the word interesting, right? He's always using the word interesting. And the way you keep a stock interesting in the markets is through implied volatility. So if the stock is moving up and moving down and moving, as long as it's not just flatline dead, there's gonna be some volatility. And the winner is going to be the one who manages to keep their stock the most interesting with the highest implied volatility. And Saylor understands that.
So then, all right, if you see MSTR going, or Bitcoin, going to 5-10, $1 million in 5 to 10 years or so, where do you see kind of MSTR going? Do you have like a price prediction here for the end of the year?
For the end of this year, I think if Bitcoin goes to $250,000 to $350,000, I think MSTR is easily sitting at somewhere in the region of $1,200 to $1,600 a share.
And that would be like a 3 to 4x, I think, raise from where it is right now, right? That's at a little over $300. So we could see MSTR, essentially, because Bitcoin then would be doing a 2 to 3x. So it would be you see the multiplier effect for MSTR to be about 2-ish.
Yeah, it just depends on how the market takes it. You may see that depending on how all of these other competitors that come into the space, it may reduce the potential quote unquote multiplier that MSTR has. But again, it all depends on the social network. Just because Twitter is around doesn't mean that Facebook wasn't infinitely more valuable, right? So you gotta wait and see how these companies react. So it may be more than that. We may approach a $2,000 level per share, but first things first, Bitcoin has to go up.
Now, what do you take of all of this institutional adoption? I know we've talked about Jack Mallers, and it's, him, Tether, and, Howard Lutnick's old company as well, kind of coming in and building this. But we also have GameStop, and there's also the talk of some of the Mag 7 coming in. We've got Amazon voting on it. We've had obviously Microsoft shoot it down drastically. But then there's also Meta, which could be pretty interesting because of how much voting rights Mark Zuckerberg has. What do you take of like all of this institutional adoption coming towards the Bitcoin, I guess, standard that Saylor has lined out?
The world changed on June 15th, 2023. And I told everyone that this happened. And it's one of the reasons why my videos started going viral, is because as soon as on that day when BlackRock filed for the ETF application, everything was different. And a lot of people didn't see the game theory around it. And I told everyone, you're going to see institutional adoption, you're going to see nation state adoption, you're going to see suddenly Bitcoin's great for the environment, you're going to see all of this because this is how capital moves. So what do I take of it? It's exactly as I expected it to happen, exactly what I've been saying for a year and a half. This is nothing out of the ordinary here. Everyone kind of thinks that the ETFs came and then the next evolution was the nation states. And I'm here to tell you that's completely dumb fuck stupid. What happened was that the nation states and the politicians and everyone else is downstream of BlackRock, not the other way around. That BlackRock ETF and the application itself was the single most important thing to happen to Bitcoin since the inception of Bitcoin. And I'll stand by that.
Yeah, and I mean, it seems like it's really pushing everything forward. So I mean, no real argument with you against that here. But with that, right, it seems like the traditional financial world is now starting to get ingrained into the Bitcoin standard, right? Whether it's nation states, whether it's institutions and everything else. But the interesting aspect of all of this is it seems like traditional finance has not found a way to evaluate companies like MicroStrategy, now Strategy, where we've seen, a company that has lost money for 4 years on paper that, essentially just keeps buying and buying more Bitcoin, be one of the best performing stocks that there is. So, do you think that traditional finance will catch up, or do you think there's going to be potentially a new way to evaluate companies that have Bitcoin on the balance sheet opposed to just, cash balances or other cash-like assets?
It's not that it's not possible to, you just weren't allowed to, right? Until the FASB rules came into change and all this other stuff. So now you're going to start seeing from the earnings tomorrow, you're going to start seeing, how corporates and hedge funds start to evaluate Strategy as a growth company. So I'm looking forward to this shift happening in the markets as well, because I think you're going to see a drastic repricing to the upside at some point in the next 12 months.
Okay, so let's dive into that. What do you mean by the drastic, revaluing to the upside?
So Strategy has been viewed basically as a company that holds a bunch of Bitcoin and that's it. With the FASB accounting rule changes, it basically can now turn into a growth company. You can start looking at it as a growth company. And when you start analyzing it as a growth company, you start asking yourself, if you've got $1 billion, who do you want to give it to? Do you want to give it to Tesla, that's going to need 18 months to 3 years to start giving you a return on capital from the day that you give them $1 billion? Or do you give it to Strategy, who the day you give them $1 billion, they buy Bitcoin with it and it starts returning you money from 6 days later, right? So that return on capital, return on investment cycle has gone drastically down as a result of using Bitcoin as a growth engine. And I think that all of these over-bloated, quote-unquote growth companies are going to be repriced at this point. And investors are going to have to decide, like, where is this future growth going to come from? And if I want that future growth, then I need to invest my capital in the right place. And I think you're kind of starting to see it at this point. But that repricing will happen at some point. As soon as it clicks, you're going to see a violent repricing. And I don't know when it clicks, because in 2019, it clicked for Russell 2000 asset managers that they needed to own Tesla. And suddenly Tesla went vertical. That's basically what's going to happen to Strategy. We just don't know when.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a kind of like an interesting development here as we're seeing it, because I think, if you look at the numbers, right, the volume of the trading volume of MSTR, it's that of the Mag 7, and the market cap is significantly less. So as the market cap of MSTR continues to increase, right, the price keeps on going up, whether there's a stock split or whatever, there's more notice around it now. How do you see this kind of playing out? Do you see MicroStrategy eventually becoming the most powerful company in the world simply because, other companies just won't be able to catch up because they already got a 500,000 Bitcoin head start here? The best place to buy Bitcoin in the United States and Canada is the Bitcoin Well. You could go to the bitcoinwell.com/green candle and sign up today, and they will give you wishing well tokens. They are one of the only exchanges in the United States that will give you free sats every time you buy Bitcoin. You have a chance to win 1 million sats every time you buy. You get wishing well tokens. You flick the coin down the wishing well, and you have the chance to win 1 million sats. You heard me here, folks. 1 million sats. And on top of that, they have the absolute best over-the-counter service where you can make purchases over $50,000, and they will walk you through the whole thing. They have the best rates in the United States and in Canada. And on top of that, they have the best white glove service where they will take you through those giant purchases just so you feel comfortable. You'll get it in cold storage, and it's strictly non-custodial. They are saying, we want you to experience the true power of Bitcoin and that self-custody. So go to the well, sign up, bitcoinwell.com/green candle today. Enough for me, back to the show.
Yeah, that's the thing. Strategy is one, right? Michael Saylor has won here. When you have finality or absolute finality of scarcity, how much you own of the asset is very, very important. And the harder everyone else tries to buy the asset, it increases your valuation, right? So, it's going to be really interesting to see strategy just keep getting further and further away as everyone else tries to catch up. But the game has pretty much already been won as long as strategy keeps executing on exactly what they've said they're going to execute on. They've got a phenomenal team, and I continue to leave my money there, so I believe they will.
I got one little wrench to throw in that, and I want to hear what your thoughts are on it.
Here we go. I'm glad I started on the next coffee then. That's good.
Well, it's Mark Zuckerberg, right? I mean, he's doing the whole rebranding type of thing. He's going on podcasts. He's got his little hair coming out, his chain, his glasses, whatever. But he does have more voting rights than any other, company that has a higher market cap than MSTR. So if he wanted to implement what MSTR is doing right now and what Michael Saylor has been doing, he could. Now, would he be able to obtain as much Bitcoin as MSTR? Probably would be pretty difficult, and who knows? But how do you see potentially Mark Zuckerberg, I guess, almost trying to come for the throne of Michael Saylor here?
No.
Okay. Do you see anybody else even coming close? Like even what Jack Mallers in 21 doing?
No, not at all. Because the moment they buy a Bitcoin and push the price up, the value of of strategy goes up, right? So the question is are they going to be able to acquire 500,000 Bitcoin, 550,000 Bitcoin now without pushing strategy further ahead? And also, while they push strategy further ahead, the implied volatility on strategy goes up. And worldwide, capital owners like the big dog in the pen, and they'll just give strategy way more capital. So no, that's not. Again, this is not about winning one or the other. What this is about is other players coming into the game to take part, right? And that's what you're going to see. You're going to see multiple social networks for dollars that are going to be using the Bitcoin growth engine to try and suck some of that capital into their vortex. And strategy is just going to be the biggest one.
Yeah. So it seems like, no matter what, right? If anybody else tries to come in and I guess, take the throne as the largest asset holder or the largest Bitcoin holder from an institution, it's just going to rise strategy up, which would then, accelerate their own strategy, right? Exactly. So essentially is an arms race that nobody can win outside of Michael Saylor and strategy here. But I want to dive into a little bit more of the nation states. Now, it seems like the game theory is starting to play out with that, right? We've got, the United States kind of doing a Bitcoin strategic reserve where tossing it around. It seems like there's a new headline on how they're going to try to obtain some more Bitcoin every other day, but nothing has seemed to come to fruition. Now, how do you see the nation state arms race playing out with, obtaining as much Bitcoin as possible?
I don't think it begins until the US starts buying. So really the clock is ticking on when the US starts buying. And then after that, every nation will have to do it. It's just going to be a case of timing. So it's, you know, at the end of the day, it's inevitable. The complete truth is that BlackRock's in the game now. So this is completely inevitable. It's there's no way around this. Every nation will be owning Bitcoin. Every company in the United States that's publicly listed will own Bitcoin. Any company that has BlackRock as a shareholder will be guided over the next decade to buy Bitcoin. Simple as that.
Yeah. So do you think BlackRock is more pulling the strings here than maybe the United States government or anything else? Do you think that they're the most powerful player here?
I would hate to tell you that Donald Trump is not the most powerful person in America, because that's going to completely blow your little brain, right? So let's not go there.
Okay.
We got president art of the deal in place. So I'm sure all of this is a genius orchestra orchestrated by the current administration, which, by the way, I'm a fan of, right? I'm a fan of the administration. But when it comes to long-term macroeconomics, there are forces in play that, you know, your president, my prime minister are, you know, second fiddle to.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, right? So you kind of brought up the macroeconomic lens. There's been a lot of it seems like tension between Powell and Trump here with like the lowering of the interest rates and all of that. Now, how do you see us just overall, like in the overall economy? Just yeah, I want to hear your opinion of kind of where you think we're at, because it seems like we've got CEOs telling us we're in a recession. The big hedge fund guys say everything's fine, but you know, it's all about the Trump tariffs. How would you describe the economy as it stands right now?
Yeah, from what I can see, consumer is pretty healthy. I think if there is a recession, it's going to be a very mild recession because there will be capital injected. Everything really depends on the bond market right now. And I think there was a lot of conversation from Bitcoiners about, you know, this art of the deal to launch the tariffs was designed to basically bring down the 10-year interest rate in order to refi capital or refi $5 trillion worth of debt. And then they implemented it, and 4 days later they were wrong because the 10-year rate was basically higher than what it was on Liberation Day. And then, so I started thinking about it, and I kind of came up. Nobody knows the real answer, by the way, right? Like, we're not in the Oval Office. We don't know the strategy. We don't know the art of the deal. We don't know any of this. So again, it's all speculation. What we absolutely do know is that those Bitcoiners that were sitting around in suits in front of bookshelves were completely wrong, because in 4 days, if they were right, then I shudder to imagine what it means if a monster like Besant and a monster like Lutnick were outfoxed by China in 4 days, right? I don't see that as a reality. I can't accept that as a reality. So then I started thinking about, like, okay, well, what else could be happening here? And I think that the goal really is to, I think Trump, whatever the public drama is between Trump and Powell, at the end of the day, I know and I can feel that Trump trusts Powell not to let America go to shit, right? I think that's a very simple conclusion to come to. And so from a Trump perspective, you kind of want to go as hard as possible on China, cause the economy to buckle a little bit, because you know Powell's going to come in. And by the way, that gives him the legitimate grounds to come in, not just pressure from the president. You also depower China because they'll have to sell off a bunch of treasuries, and they've been using these treasury holdings, you know, over the head of America as a threat. So you depower China, like, by forcing them to sell their treasuries in the middle of this tariff war. And you get a lot of things accomplished by just threatening the idea of a potential deep recession, right? So you don't look good while you're doing it. The stock market, you know, goes down, and of course, you know, it's been just about over 100 days, and the stock market's down. But what you set yourself up for is a comeback like never before, because the liquidity engines all over the world have to turn on. China has to turn on its liquidity. Europe has to turn on its liquidity. America has to turn on its liquidity. UK has to turn on liquidity. So I have a feeling that the goal here is actually to try and raise the 10-year, not lower it in the short term, because I think the debt refi has to happen by like Q3, Q4. And by then you could have actual lower rate with legitimate ground rather than trying to, act like we're playing the deal and it's super genius, smart Team America planning.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting to see kind of like, I guess, the public tension.
Hold on, let me ask you a question. Do you think that Besant, who basically executed the trades that broke the Bank of England, got outfoxed by China in 4 days?
I don't believe so, to be honest.
I don't think so either.
Yeah,
I don't think so either.
I really don't think so. So, I mean, I think that this is all kind of a part of the plan. And I think, Trump has basically had 4 years to sit on it, right? Like since 2020 to 2024, like what would I do differently? And he's kind of put a lot of smart people in his room with him. And they've come up with this. Yeah.
This administration is full of killers. Like, these are not your average politician. These guys are straight financial murderers. So, like, to think that, these guys got basically, put over a barrel in 4 days by China, I think is very naive. Now, when people say, oh, this is the plan, that's the plan, I think that's also wrong, because when you are planning strategy like this, you got to look at probabilities. You got to look, okay, so what if China responds? How could they respond? You got to look at, what if they don't respond? Because that was an option too, right? China could just not have responded. Unfortunately for them, I guess they did. And so now we're down this path. So the plans like this sort of thing are generally, games of probabilities, but you kind of want to get to an end goal. And I think the end goal is to sort of distribute the China control on manufacturing sort of to 15 countries. You definitely don't want to bring back all of the manufacturing that's outside the US because it benefits the US to keep it there. But you want to bring back essential manufacturing, right? You want to probably bring back drones. You want to bring back pharmaceuticals. You want to bring back a few things, but not everything.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100% on that. And I think that that's been essentially all a part of the plan. I think, Trump saw a lot of issues in the economy previously, whether it's, obviously we've seen a lot of inflation and that data that they've been touting out to us, CPI and all of that, has kind of been, I guess, showing that we're on a house of cards. Like, they're saying that, oh, inflation's at 2.5, 2.8, 3%, but we all know, and I think Trump has enough smart people in his cabinet and in his ear telling him that, look, the dollar isn't really as strong as it is. We're going on a very slippery slope. The debt is absolutely skyrocketing. I mean, if you sit on the usdebtclock.org, you'll look at that thing and you still get nauseous just watching how much that number keeps on ticking up. So I think that, Trump and all of these people have essentially seen the issues on the current system, and they don't want it to crash, right? They don't want everything to just pitfall. And that was on the slippery slope that we were on. And so they've come up with all these solutions, tariffs being one of them. Need to bring back manufacturing, especially if, we're going to have that global reserve currency. So I think he's thinking, all right, we got basically 2 years to be able to maybe crash the economy just slightly, bring it down from the inflated rounds, but then, as you're kind of describing, make it ramp back up. So, come 2026, 7, when those, secondary positions start to come up for re-election, that the Republican House can win again. So I think It's all been kind of a part of the plan. And that's why we've seen Trump essentially move very quickly with all of this, right?
Yeah, that's been remarkable.
Yeah,
that's been remarkable. The speed of execution on kind of like everything has been quite shocking. But that's how you got to do things. If you want to execute really quickly and you have a long-term plan, it's kind of better to pull the Band-Aid off up front, right? I think they've also done an interesting thing. We'll see whether it pans out on basically trying to get all of these countries that were so-called allies with China to renegotiate a trade deal with the US. And you can bet your ass that they're going to, in those trade deals, hamstring China as much as they can, and penalize those countries should they choose to bend the knee to China in the future.
Okay, so you've discovered Bitcoin and are on the path to financial self-sovereignty. But simply holding Bitcoin is not enough. You need to make sure that it's scored properly and you are in 100% control over all your assets. So sharing your keys with third parties and taking on that counterparty risk is not the answer. The answer is pure and simple. It's uncompromising self-custody, and there's no better way to do it than the Bitcoin way. They've got over 25 years of cybersecurity experience, and their team of experts can help you properly self-custody your Bitcoin, secure your digital life, configure your privacy phones, and even establish a Plan B residency if you're looking to do so. So I'm gonna help you guys out here and give you a free consultation if you take the first step and visit thebitcoinway.com/green candle, and you can check out the boys at the Bitcoin Way and see how they can help you become self-sovereign. Now, with the kind of like this, it almost seems like organized chaos, sporadic nature of making these tariffs and kind of these moves. It seems like it sends a lot of spikes and volatility in the market. Now, how do you see all of this, playing out? I kind of describe it as maybe like a short-term recession. Do you kind of are on that same wavelength where maybe we're going to have to see a few months of sideways chop before we see this thing really start to take off?
Yeah, I think at this moment in the markets, I think you're waiting for a trade deal. You're waiting for some kind of certainty on what a trade deal looks like, what a new trade deal kind of feels like, and then the market's going to have some certainty on what direction to go in. Until then, I think we're basically sitting in this chop. Right now, the market needs certainty, and it just doesn't have it, right? And then Trump is doing everything he can not to give certainty because that gives him power in negotiation. So that's why you see Trump say something and then Bessent or Lutnick go out 2 days later and completely go the opposite direction. It's a negotiation tool. So, but unfortunately, that puts the market in a difficult place.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely does. It seems that, I don't think I've ever seen more volatility in the Dixie, for example, because of everything just going up and down. Even the strength of the dollar is kind of being in question. But we talked a little bit about BlackRock earlier, and I want to dive into that, right? Because it seems like, they've seemingly done almost a 180, but the banks and everybody else still, I guess, are publicly against Bitcoin, even though, we've had some more regulations in the US basically say, hey, if you want to go through and hold Bitcoin or crypto for your clients, go nuts. But we still have the likes of Jamie Dimon and others really kind of being negative towards Bitcoin in the public eye. So how do you view the banking relationship with this, even though, the banks and BlackRock kind of work hand in hand?
Yeah, I mean, look, I can only tell you from my experience, and my experience is I've had two banks in two different jurisdictions outside the US offer me money on Bitcoin and Bitcoin related products at central bank rates. That's huge. So if they're willing to do it, and these are not small banks, these are not your crypto banks. I'm talking about established private banking relationships and your rich grandfather's bank, basically. If they're willing to do that already, then the US is coming along. Jamie Dimon just, says what he needs to say to get the effect that they want to get. But overall, this is happening, right? You're going to get lending on your Bitcoin. And I was right again. I wish I could, I said this probably a year and a half ago. I wish I could buy a put option on every one of these venture-backed Bitcoin lending companies because they're all completely fucked. Because the big boys are in the game now. So what are you going to do? Try and get lending on your Bitcoin at 14% for the feels? Or are you just going to go to JP Morgan whenever they do it, or Goldman Sachs and borrow it at Fed rates?
Yeah. So how do you see these type of products basically like revolutionizing the way that Bitcoin is obtained? Do you see it almost like, hey, let's get a mortgage or something like that, like some similar type of product at a low rate in order to obtain as much Bitcoin as possible?
That would be ideal, but I think that comes much later. I think the idea of a Bitcoin mortgage comes much later. Bitcoin is basically a high-level private banking asset. And it will be used as collateral amongst the wealthy very soon. It already is, right, with the banks that I'm talking about. And that will come down to, well, first it needs to spread to the US. and Europe. And once it does that, then we can start going down the ranks on who can borrow money to buy Bitcoin. But right now, I can borrow, like I'm saying, I can literally tomorrow, I can borrow money against Bitcoin at central bank rates from private banks. That's now. This is right now. This is not like in 6 months. This is right now. And to put that into perspective, right? Like a Swiss central bank, the rate is 1%. So I could literally right now borrow money against IBIT or MSTR or whatever at 1%, convert it from Swiss francs to US dollars, and buy MSTY and make 6% a month. So I'm paying 1% a year on the Swiss franc, taking the currency risk between the two, and then buying MSTY, paying 6% a month.
So it seems like that's your own personal infinite money glitch right there, where it seems like, hey, like, you know, you just keep borrowing and then you'll be able to pay that off easily. And then, you know, who knows, like that extra 5% spread there seems like it'll be paying off pretty nice.
It's not a 5% spread because the interest that I'm paying is annually, and the return that I'm getting on MSTY is monthly.
Oh my God. That is insane. That's wild. So why are more people doing this? Why are people seeing this?
Because it's only for high net worths, right?
Okay.
Like it's not for retail yet. That's why I keep trying to tell people in Bitcoin, like, you have to own enough Bitcoin. Otherwise, these facilities are not going to be available to you. I'm lucky. I'm in a unique position having the British Hodl, you know, hoopla around it. I've got these banks talking to me now, right? Like, because they understand like what's going on. And they understand who knows what's going on. So, you know, it's quite intriguing for me. It's quite unique for me to be in that position where I'm not even opening these conversations. They're being opened with me. So, yeah, you're just not going to get access to it, right? But even then, by the way, it's still advantageous to use Strategy because Strategy can borrow money at lower than 1%. Their blended interest rate on their bonds right now is like 0.6% or something. So they're still beating me, and I have to take a currency risk moving it from the Swiss franc to the US dollar. So Strategy is just a wonderful, wonderful product.
Yeah. So with the high net worth kind of aspect that you're talking about, do you see like more people, I guess, like, you know, if these banks are coming to you now, it seems like they maybe want to test the waters with somebody who's like vocal and kind of in the Bitcoin space? Or do you think that other high net worth individuals that are maybe, you know, not as much in the limelight are asking for these type of products and in fact, like, you know, utilizing things like this already?
No, these guys are not coming to test. The banks that I'm talking about are not coming to test this product with British fucking Hodl. Like that's not happening, right? Like this has been, again, a lot of Bitcoiners seem to think that this is new. None of this is new. This has been happening on every other asset throughout history. It's just now they can use it on Bitcoin. So none of this is new. I'm not the test guinea pig. The fact that I'm getting access to some of this stuff now means that there are people much wealthier than me that have had access to it. There's, you know, Michael Saylor's been getting access to this in front of our eyes. So no, I'm not the test guinea pig for 200-year-old banks.
Okay. Well, that makes a little bit more sense now because I'm like, this is a kind of like the first that I'm hearing of it, but it sounds like it's a product that's not yet available in, I guess, like U.S. banks or, I mean, maybe even major European banks just yet. But it seems like obviously if this is happening at a very old bank that you have access to, there's going to be more people that are going to be flocking to this type of product. And, you know, it's just going to start the network effect of all of these things starting to turn the corner. So, but let's take a step back into BlackRock. And I'm very curious your opinion on their, I guess, connection with Coinbase and all of this, because, you know, obviously Coinbase, a very publicly traded company, the biggest exchange in the United States, but they're also the major custodian of, I believe, 9 of the 13 Bitcoin ETFs in the US. And BlackRock has kind of diversified out of that, of, you know, having some custody with Coinbase and now with another player. So how do you see this relationship, I guess, turning out? And does Coinbase kind of having their fingers in a lot of this worry you in a sense?
I mean, there's always custody risk, right? Like custody, if you're not going to custody your own Bitcoin, which is one of the beautiful things about Bitcoin, then there's always going to be custody risk. Am I worried about BlackRock adding custodians? No, that's completely normal, right? It's completely normal to do that in TradFi. So no, I'm not worried about it at all. The more custodians there are, the better it is because it spreads the quote unquote risk even more. I think BlackRock is, BlackRock's not out. BlackRock's not one of these, VC funded crypto firms, right? They put people through vigorous testing and to make sure that their capital is safe. So do I think that BlackRock is out here trusting their Bitcoin with Coinbase just on a whim? No, I don't think so.
All right, that's fair to say because I mean, I do just think it is interesting to see them kind of diversify out, but I do worry about the custody risk of just simply 9 of the 13 having majority custody through one single player. It seems like the only one that is doing their own custody is the Fidelity ETF. So it is something that I've kind of, I guess, tossed around and toyed with, just been kind of worried in a sense of what potentially could happen. What could be the next FTX? What is the next failure point for all of this? And
yeah, I mean, if you're worried about that, then remember, 50% of your ETF allocation goes to Fidelity and 50% goes to BlackRock or whichever one of the other funds. Like I would adjust your holdings based on the custodian. I think that's completely reasonable, right? If you are worried about Coinbase, then you sell down a portion of your ETF holdings and you move it to Fidelity, and now you have diversified custodians already.
Yeah, that's fair to say. Obviously, the diversification kind of helps eliminate some of that risk, right? So, but I want to get back to Michael Saylor because it seems like he's been extremely influential when it comes to this administration. So they've been kind of intertwined where we've seen Saylor, talking with Eric Trump and all of that. Now, how influential do you think Saylor has been in just this overall Bitcoin related strategy that the United States is starting to pull in? And do you think I know we joked around and said, Trump might not be the most powerful guy, but it seems like Saylor might be the most influential guy outside of course, Satoshi, when it comes to the Bitcoin space.
I think Michael Saylor has done a wonderful job in being a spokesperson for Bitcoin, in being a strategist in Bitcoin, in helping people understand Bitcoin. And he's been shouting about it for 4 years now, that everyone should copy what I'm doing. He understands the game. He understands game theory. He understands. Yeah, do I think he's been instrumental? Of course I do. I think he's been instrumental for all of us. All of our understandings and the potential for Bitcoin has gone up because of Michael Saylor's contributions in the space. And I applaud him for that and thank him for that.
Now with that, right? I mean, we kind of talked about a little bit earlier about the MSTR potential multiplier when it comes to Bitcoin. We've talked in the past, obviously, about models and how to project off with Bitcoin and how you don't agree with a lot of them.
What's your favorite model? What's your favorite model?
I don't have a favorite model. Maybe Carmen Electra back in the day or something else, right? I mean, I don't necessarily think I don't necessarily believe it. What did you say? I want to hear it.
You dirty little boy.
I mean, I'm just, I'm just throwing it out there, right? I mean, how could you not? I mean, especially in her heyday with Dennis Rodman. But back to the evaluation aspect of it.
Listen, I got a reputation to protect, so why don't we stick to investments instead?
I'll keep it there. So with the models and kind of the projections of MSTR, Bitcoin, and all of that, right? What do you think has been, I guess, essentially like most, mind-boggling to the traditional financial world? Why are they keep so obsessed to try to, pin it down into a model when there's so many things that just, can't really be explained here when it comes to the Bitcoin space?
Yeah, I think that TradFi works on projections, right? TradFi works on expectations, on reports, on what we think the earnings are going to be and all this other stuff. So I think it's part of their psyche to try and just put things into a box of expectations, right? And that also helps when you're trying to sell an idea to someone as well. So I think that's why all different models seem to get fanfare. Besides my model was called the gonadal model, and it just basically measures your ball sack and how big your balls are, and how hard you can hodl as a result of the size of your gonads, which is, by the way, the most accurate model, and it just doesn't get the fanfare, right? But we get Spaghetti Boy out here, and all these other people that have their ideas of their lines and whatever, and it catches fanfare, whereas the most accurate model, the gonadal model, doesn't.
Self-custody can be a daunting task. That's why I've partnered with Bitbox. They have the best hardware wallet. They make it the easiest to put Bitcoin in self-custody. So go to bitbox.swiss/greencandle today and use promo code greencandle, and you can get 5% off your entire order. They make it so easy, all in one. You could get the hardware wallet, you could get their punch plates, you could do it all right there on that website to make the self-custody experience the easiest it can be. So visit bitbox.swiss/greencandle, use promo code greencandle, get 5% off your entire order, and get your Bitcoin off an exchange into self-custody today. All right, enough for me. Let's get back to the show. And, I wanted to bring that up because obviously, you've got your model when it comes to just strictly just hodling, right? Like you can't really describe how that psychology of these psychopaths. I mean, Michael Saylor has even come out and said he might just take his Bitcoin to the grave with him. And, as you were describing these products, it seems like eventually we might not have to have that selling of Bitcoin, at least in the short term. So do you see that as it has how
no, you
Bitcoin
will.
is?
No, you
Okay.
will. You will have selling of Bitcoin. You absolutely will, because we got to take yours. You will sell your Bitcoin, Brandon, and everyone else who's sitting there with less than one Bitcoin. You will sell it because I want it. I want your Bitcoin, and I'm going to take it. I'm going to give you all the incentives to get rid of it, and you're going to be left with no Bitcoin. That's the reality of the world. That's not the reality of Bitcoin. That's the reality of the fucking world. You bought a property, and now the property prices didn't go up enough, and now you have to sell, and I'm going to take it. That's how it's going to work. It's going to be very slow. It's going to be very subtle. It's going to be fully incentivized, and you're going to be left with no fucking Bitcoin because you're sitting there going, I'm going to stick my head in a pile of sand and not understand how TradFi works. And all I'm going to do, like a little peasant, is sell a little bit of my Bitcoin on a monthly basis to live on. And that's all good. And I'm living the Bitcoin standard, ha ha, he he, hug a happy tree, and hug a happy hippie. That's what most Bitcoiners' realities are. And you're going to be completely and utterly fucked with no Bitcoin. And it serves you right.
So then do you think that because these products of being able to basically borrow against your own Bitcoin, for the high net worth that are available right now, that's going to be basically the reality is that essentially these high net worth are going to be able to buy more Bitcoin based on borrowing against their assets?
Of course. Think about what you're saying. Of course. If I can borrow money at central bank. So put it like this, right? Let's say you use some retarded Bitcoin backed, happy hippie company that's been backed by a bunch of Bitcoiners that basically, bought a bunch of Bitcoin and now launched a Bitcoin lending product and have to charge you 14% because no one will insure them they have to lie to you firstly, right? Because what a lot of these morons say, I had one moron try and pitch me an event here in Dubai on lending. And I said, how do you manage custody risk? And he goes, well, we have, collaborative custody. I was like, that's a lie. That's basically no custody. Collaborative custody is the biggest lie in the Bitcoin lending space because what it means is you do not have custody over your Bitcoin. You might have one key, but that means you do not have custody over your Bitcoin. It's the same as me giving, 2 keys to someone else, right? For example, right? And there being 3 keys. So it's like you don't have control of your Bitcoin, firstly. Secondly, because you're small and because you're a tiny lender, you're doing quote unquote collaborative custody and trusting clients with their own keys, you now have high insurance costs on that deal that you've done. So you have no access to the actual money printer, which means you got to charge 12 to 14% interest rates. I, on the other hand, go and put my Bitcoin that I want to lend against up for custody with one of the oldest banks in the world, and I can borrow at central bank rates, right? So in the US, 4.5 to 5%, for example, and you're paying 12 to 14%. That spread in the middle is a way for me to seep away your Bitcoin over time. It's not immediate. It's not like someone's going to knock on your door and steal your Bitcoin, but over time, you will be incentivized to give up your Bitcoin unless you get smart really, really quickly.
Yeah, and it seems like that, I mean, that spread is massive. And obviously, you know, with the difference in that spread, you're going to be able to borrow a lot more, right? Because those differences of the products available, right? I mean, you can get the 4%, Sailor can get maybe 1%, MSTR can get 0.001% or whatever they're getting right now. So there's definitely, you know, levels to this game. So do you see Bitcoin just kind of, I guess, in our lifetime, just strictly staying as like a store of value and for people to be able to borrow against it strictly as an asset instead of
I put this tweet out the other day and basically said, like, the idea of, you know, spending your Bitcoin and building these fucking pointless companies on how to spend your Bitcoin is basically dead, right? And Jack's pivot is the marker for that. The world that we're going into and we're growing into, and I agree with Sailor on this, is Bitcoin is savings and the US dollar is your currency that you will operate with. And that's the reality, whether you like it or not. Just get with the program.
Now, so you don't see us ever getting to a place where it's peer-to-peer, like similar to what Jack Dorsey is saying, where, you know, if Bitcoin just stays as a store of value, it's failed. Do you think it's failed then?
No, I think he's a moron for saying that specific thing.
Okay,
But
that's interesting.
Jack Dorsey is one of the best entrepreneurs of our time, and certainly my lifetime. But that specific thing is you know, I disagree with that. Let's say that.
Yeah, you don't have to agree with everything, you know, somebody says it, but still agree that they're intelligent. So, I mean, I can hear you on that. You know, but I do think it's very interesting, kind of the shift almost that we've seen with, I guess, you know, in the Bitcoin space, right? We've got the Jack Dorseys, but we've gotten Sailor saying it's essentially the greatest collateral that's ever been created. And, you know, you brought up the collaborative custody model, and I kind of want to dive into that. So do you think that the greatest solution for all of this is essentially, you know, you got to give your Bitcoin to whatever trusted bank, and then that's how you'll be able to get these products? And, you know, the big dogs, once they actually start to come in and offer these products, they're going to swallow up some of the little guys that have been around, but they're strictly like just the Bitcoin backed companies.
Yeah. I think that if you want the best rates, you're going to have to give up custody of the pristine collateral. And that's the exchange that you deal with, right? And it's up to you how much you want to give up. But you need enough in order to make that choice, right? Most people won't have to make that choice because they won't have enough to start with. But for the people that I speak to that do have enough, they have optionality, right? I can give up 10%, 20% of my stack and borrow against that. And I can give it up to an insured custodian and borrow against that at central bank rates. And that's a personal decision that they and their financial advisors have to make to see if it makes sense for their strategy and what they want to do. So, you know, it's how the game works. It's how the game has always worked, right? Rich people get richer, poor people get poorer, and the middle class gets cooked. It's just is what it is. Bitcoin is, you know, you can try and elevate yourself out of that, but if you want access to capital, it works a certain way, and you better get used to it working that way. I'm very, very sorry. I'm sorry that all the Bitcoiners lied to you, but for the next 50 years, this is how it's going to work. Bitcoin is pristine collateral, and it will be used in this way by high net worth individuals. And by the way, high net worth individuals will prefer Bitcoin, and you will see a moment where their bankers are recommending that they pivot their asset holdings from all these TradFi assets that we know of to Bitcoin so that they can lend against it. It will be encouraged to those high net worth individuals. It already is being encouraged. I've got people I'm speaking to. One guy with $250 million net worth is having a different conversation with his financial advisor for a specific bank than someone else I know who's with that same bank, except he's worth under $10 million. And his advisor is having a different conversation with him. Same fucking bank. Talking to two different people because of net worth completely differently. This is how the game works. Chamath said this years ago. You got to get the fucking money. That's it. You got to get the money. If you don't get the money, you don't have no choices.
My favorite thing about Bitcoin is meeting Bitcoiners in person. That's why I'm so excited to tell you guys about what is going on June 14th down in beautiful Tampa Bay, Florida. That's the Sound Money Soiree paired with Bitcoin Day. They're bringing a full day of great talks with amazing speakers like your boy here. And we're topping it off with a black tie event just for you and bring in that hot lady friend. We had Bitcoin cross 100K. We're all getting girlfriends, folks. So come on down to beautiful Tampa, Florida. And if you use the link below, you will get 10% off your entire order, whether you want to go to just the black tie event or black tie event plus Bitcoin Day. You'll get 10% off using the links below. Also, if you're thinking about going to BitBlock Boom in April, if you're going to Vegas in May, or if you're thinking about going to Prague in June, use my promo code GREENCANDLE for all of those. You'll get 10% off your entire order. And come bug me. I hope to see you guys very soon at one of these great in-person events. Enough for me. Back to the show. There's levels to it, to say the very least. And I think that is going to, essentially accelerate, especially as the products start to come in with this, right? Because if you're able to borrow and just continue to buy Bitcoin at this low rate, it seems like this is something that, Spaghetti Boy and these models didn't really take into account, right? So I want to hear if you've got a Bitcoin price prediction for me, where you think we're going because of all of that we're seeing, right? We're getting institutions rapidly buying up, we're getting nation states, and now it seems like we're going to get some high net worth individuals as we're seeing the ETFs even starting to spike up as well. So do you think that we're essentially in this exit velocity and we're about to take off here pretty soon?
What does pretty soon mean, right? Because in TradFi, pretty soon could mean 4 years. Do I think that we are on an amazing path? Yes. Do I think that it's absolutely imminent, like tomorrow? Probably not. I think there's a lot of uncertainty that the market needs to process. But do I absolutely think that if you are holding Bitcoin, and by the way, I talk about these things and Bitcoiners lose their little brains, right? And lose their minds because they're like, oh, you're telling people about debt financing and TradFi and lending and income and all this other shit. And I'm like, listen, guys, the way Bitcoiners are now talking, it's almost like saying that we are the American military. We have all this amazing weaponry, and all we're going to do is teach our soldiers how to fire an AK-47. Right? That would be stupid if you were the American military and that was your decision, right? Can we agree on that? That would be stupid, right? That's all I'm saying. Learn these things that are happening. Learn what the options are. Learn the weapons that are going to be used against you so that you can decide whether you want to use them or not and how to use them. Because it's happening. One way, I can't even say it's coming anymore because I'm having these conversations. Like, it's here, it's happening, and it's your responsibility whether you get smart with it or not. But what do I have? What price prediction do I have on Bitcoin? Firstly, my price predictions are completely irrelevant. I don't think that we're going to go to $1 million unless there's some kind of S curve that kicks off like in the next couple of years. Maybe, potentially, right? What do I know? But I think we have a really good chance of hitting somewhere between $300,000 to $400,000 in this cycle, should it be a normal cycle.
Now, yeah, with that, do you still see the extended volatility with that we've kind of previously been seeing, or because we have some of these bigger players coming in who, like the strategies of the world, the nation states, like they're not going to be dumping or anything like that. The big dogs that are coming in with the products that we have, it seems like we'll get some volatility, But you know, the
That's the
downside
question,
of this.
right? That's the question. That those two things that you just mentioned will basically determine whether we hit an S curve or not. And I believe in the S curve, right? Out of all of the geniuses that have talked about anything in terms of modeling, I truly believe that there is an S curve moment coming for Bitcoin. And in my 5 minutes of, again, I'm not a math PhD. I know you got to be a math PhD to be fucking smart in Bitcoin, apparently, right? But in my 5 minutes of chat GPT analysis of what a power law is and what all these functions are, typically speaking, it starts off looking like one of these nerdy things, and then it turns into an S curve if it's a technology that's being adopted. So, look, I don't think you have to be a genius to understand that the C-suite of America is behind Bitcoin. I don't think you need to be a genius to understand that the asset managers that run the world are pro-Bitcoin. If you just are smart enough to understand those two things, you need a higher allocation than you have. Simple as that. Let's just start off with that. Let's keep it really simple. It's not about price predictions. It's not about the dollar value of Bitcoin next week. That's not important, right? And any moron that tells you, oh, I have a model in the range is $50,000 to $5 million, it's a completely useless piece of shit model because it doesn't do anything for anyone. And plus, I thought you weren't going to sell it. So why the fuck does the price matter, right? So there's a lot of inconsistencies on that. But the reality is this: the C-suite of America is fully behind Bitcoin. The director of the FBI owns Bitcoin. That's where we're at. We went from it's money for drug dealers to the director of the FBI, director of the DNI, the commerce secretary, the treasury secretary, the president, everyone talking about, oh yeah, we own Bitcoin, right? If you understand that, you understand that BlackRock, Fidelity, all these other asset managers that run the world from a capital point of view are pro-Bitcoin. If you understand that they are putting out marketing materials, official marketing materials, calling gold a shiny rock, you don't need to be a genius to understand where this is going, right? Leave the nerdy shit to the nerds and just understand where capital is going to flow. And capital is flowing to Bitcoin.
Yeah, and it seems like every time that M2, like the global money supply, just goes up, it just seems like the exponential amount just keeps on going to Bitcoin, and it seems like that's going to keep going up, right? So that's your call to get to that one Bitcoin, right? Do everything that you can, and I always love that messaging that you always have behind there is like you need to be stacking vigorously because the writing's on the wall as you're lining it out, like. The most powerful people in the world, the biggest asset managers, the biggest money movers globally are all getting into Bitcoin. And you're not too late, but you got to get started and you got to get going here pretty quickly because, you know, I think that we're potentially going to see this S curve here take off in the next couple years at the very least because of just all of these encouraging signs. And obviously the digital scarcity aspect of Bitcoin, I don't think that the human mind has really grasped it fully yet. And so, you know, do you think that we've ever had anything, I guess, kind of whether it's like gold or what, like kind of comparable in this sense? Because
no, it's like imagine how crazy would the world be if oxygen was actually scarce? Just think about that, right? Like how scarce. How crazy would the world be if oxygen was scarce? Well, capital is the oxygen of power, right? Capital is the oxygen of power. And this is the best capital humanity's ever created.
Wow, I love that. Honestly, that just kind of blew my mind there. I really do like that one. But British Hodl, you've been absolutely electric as always. So thank you so much for coming on the show. Why don't you tell people more about where they can find out about you and your content?
Go to youtube.com or X and type in British Hodl and look for this face. And that's it. Look, I don't even know what to say anymore, bro. Like, seriously, like, what do you do? Bitcoin's 95 grand. We got a full-on fucking trade war going on. worse than anything we've ever seen in my lifetime, if not most people's lifetime that are alive. A complete reversal of economic policy by the empire. And Bitcoin is just like straight chilling at 95,000. We got liquidity that's about to flood open. Like, this is going to be too late for most people to get to a significant amount of Bitcoin. And shortly. It's not like it's 5 years away that you're gonna be quote unquote too late. Like, we are months away from it just being too fucking late. People are not really grasping this. And I would highly urge people to imagine how crazy the world would be if oxygen was actually scarce, and understand that capital is the oxygen of power.
I absolutely love that line. And I think, yeah, exactly like you said, like, we've got some very uncertain economic times. We've got potentially a recession. Some people think we are in one, some people don't. And we've got Bitcoin floating around like just under 10% of its all-time high right now, just chilling. We're basically waiting to take off. And all these big players with huge bags just ready to come on in. So I think the next few months, the next few years are going to be very exciting. And I think we're going to see some fireworks, to say the very least.
Completely agreed. Look, at the end of the day, I think you're doing an amazing job with your content. So I want to thank you. I think people should be watching your videos and understanding and listening to the people that you speak to right now. Like, it's now. It's basically now or never. Right? Like, yeah, you'll be able to use Bitcoin as a savings tech for sure. That's going to happen. But you'll still be a peasant. Like, it's a once in a species opportunity. This is like, having enough is actually important. It's not like fucking real estate where you can just build more houses. It's not like equities where you can just launch a new company and, you know, somebody understands how AI works and they get into that company early. No matter what happens, you cannot get more Bitcoin. It's actually that important.
Do as much as you can to stack as much as you can as quickly as you can. So, British Hodl, you've been absolutely electric. Thank you for the kind words, my brother. And I look forward to seeing you in Vegas.
You too, bro. Let's see how that goes out. And thanks for having me. And always a pleasure to be on the bar stool of Bitcoin, as you call it.
Thank you for tuning in to the latest episode of the State of Bitcoin podcast. If you really enjoyed this one, I've got another one cooking up for you. You can click that right here and you can go to the next episode, which is an absolute banger, where you know I'm bringing you only the latest and greatest guests. Or if you're looking for more macro-related content, you could check out my other channel, Macro Insights Pod. I got it linked for you right here. So where I'm bringing you more about stocks, real estate, traditional finance stuff. So go ahead and check that out. And if you enjoyed this podcast, go ahead and hit that like, hit that subscribe button, and tell a friend to tell a friend. All right, enough from me. I'll see you at the next one.